I was going to ask.
Okay, it is 1:35. This is the Community Service Committee. My name is Mark Kraft, and I'll call the meeting to order. If everybody would go around and state their name. Nobody wants to state their name.
Well, who you starting?
I can start. Kim with the clerk's office.
Claire Dudley, County Board.
Mary Borderson County Board.
Jane Hutton, Extension Services.
Ted Holm, Director of Environmental Services.
Catherine Hall, County Administration.
And we're going to give the floor to Kent. He's got a very enthusiastic,
Okay.
very...
All right. Danielle Eastdale with First Star Fiber is going to be here. She go and grab something for lunch, and then because Commissioner Kravitz asked me to have somebody here to talk about the Hefty Energy Bag Program and how that
Chris Rogers
fits
just
in
came
with
in the
things.
room.
So when she gets here, we'll kind of just let her go with that. But here are the other items on the agenda per se, and so we'll just launch into that. Just an update on the State Street landfill. We had a group of potential solar energy development folks approach the county, and an initial meeting back in September of 2018. They are having some conversations with OPPD right now, and there's a piece that OPPD needs to play in this. And as of yesterday, we're still kind of waiting to hear back from them.
So this isn't a picture. This is I mean, we don't have these in place.
No,
Just
but
a proposal.
this is eerily kind of resembles State Street landfill.
Okay, fine, right.
Yes, full disclosure, that's not State Street
Okay.
landfill, but solar arrays like this, and this appears to be based on what I know about solar energy and some of the more recent developments, is that this is kind of the type of thing where there are a number of arrays that are out in more public spaces or common spaces, as opposed to individual arrays that are, say, like on a building. So more flexibility with these types of things. And again, this is a project that may or may not be at State Street, but there's been some initial discussions. So that would be an alternative use there.
There are more than one company and more than one group that might be interested in this. I think we should put it out for bid.
If we do it,
If we do
we'd
it.
want to go through that.
I think there's just some initial discussions here about, is this even possible? Because of some of the restrictions that we have from our post-closure permit, we obviously need to work with DEQ and EPA on that. So there's some considerations for all of that.
This wouldn't impact the methane recovery system that we have in place out there.
No.
Okay. And
we still have that system in place. The picture on the left is actually the kind of the flare building and the equipment that's there. That is the county's. The picture on the right is merely a kind of a web photo of kind of a package type methane recovery purification plant, just for illustrative purposes. But that project continues there.
So, but that flare that you just showed the picture of, that's not even in use right now? I mean, or
It is still in use
Okay.
when the system has to get shut down for maintenance purposes.
All right.
We still have to have an operational flare to
Right.
be able to stay in compliance.
Thank you.
There's periodic maintenance that PRD, the contractor, has to do on their system, and any time that happens, the flare starts up, and we have to have that operational as a backup.
Okay, thank you.
Just a couple things about Pheasant Point. We normally do an annual contract review at a board meeting. We're tentatively scheduling that for May 7th, so I'll have some detailed information about Pheasant Point, kind of where we are with certain things, and some new initiatives that we're looking at there, and so on. One of the things that we are looking at is potentially changing the software that's used in the scale house. Right now, we use a kind of an off-the-shelf PC Scales program, which is fine. It has some limitations in terms of how we work with waste management. A few issues with special waste manifests and things like that that would be cleaned up if we were to potentially use Waste Management's proprietary software. And so we're kind of evaluating that and whether that would have some benefits. It will also have some benefits from an auditing standpoint for us. So we're evaluating that, and no decision on that, but that's kind of in the works.
Kent,
Yes.
before we would, to allow them to do that, I think we should allow our IT people to read the code to make sure there's no skimming or slide off. I don't know how to describe this, but that there's nothing built in that's beneficial to waste management and deficient to us.
Yeah, part of what we do right now to kind of reconcile that same thing is on the software we have independent data uploads that happen on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. That is given to me on a flash drive from the scale house. I upload that. That's what is used for our billing for customers. So we have an independent audit process that goes separately from what happens at the scale house, and all of those things are compared back and forth. If we were to go with Waste Management proprietary software, we would have to have assurances that that isn't compromised in any way. We would have similar things going on. We have video and scale records of every transaction that goes through. So we have the ability to go and look at that in quite a bit of detail and to verify that, you know, what's on the scale tickets is what's actually happening. So.
Hey Ken, I got a question. Is there much seasonality in the volume at the landfill? It
Yes.
looks like right now a slow season. Or?
Yes, you'll typically, I would say November, December, January, February are definitely the slowest months. Just simply because you don't have a lot of the
Thank you.
construction, seasonal activities going on. There's a fair amount of waste that are generated from those activities.
Okay, that's what I
Yep.
thought. Thanks.
Yeah, and I can, as part of the annual review, I'll try to have a seasonality
Yeah, that'd be
and I
interesting.
can show you the averages, and it's very much a bell curve
Okay.
type thing.
Yes.
And kind of on that, can you also put together again that graph that shows, you know, it's probably a 10, 8, 5-year, whatever, of what our revenues have. Oh.
It's kind of this.
Okay.
This
Is he
this
good or is he good?
You ask and you shall receive, right?
This is tonnage, but our revenues would kind of mirror that. So this shows 2017. If you can imagine, this bar is 2018. We are just right below the 500,000 deal for 2018. So there was a noticeable drop from 2016, 2017 to 2018. And part of that I can talk a little bit more about why that's happening.
Yes.
So we're back to more of the 2015,
Yeah.
11, 10
Yep.
levels.
Right. This
And
past.
so, and why?
The major reason is that we are seeing a decrease in what I'm just going to call the base tonnage. MSW, municipal solid waste, which is the stuff that is normally, it's people's garbage. And there's more and more of that is being taken out of Douglas County.
Right.
There's some of it that is going, probably a pretty good share of it, although we don't know how much, to Butler County. There's some of it that potentially is going to maybe some other landfills in Nebraska, and there's some of it that's going across the river into Iowa to Glenwood. So that's part of maybe a little bigger discussion that we have to have, and I maybe prompt into that here in a couple of slides, about potential options. And part of that is going to be very generic in discussion today, because there are potential legal issues involved in that, and we can't compromise that piece of it. But in generalities, I can talk about a couple of different things that that we are looking at internally. Okay. So one of the things that is in play right now is, back in 2009, you authorized me to negotiate with Waste Management on what we call special event disposal projects. And these particular projects are individual sites, very specific in time and scope, where, because we have a public landfill and the gate rate is published, if Waste Management is at a distinct disadvantage in trying to go after any of these kinds of projects, because if we had to hold them to the scale rate, everybody knows what that is, and they simply underbid them on everything. So what this allows me to do is, or what it allows Waste Management to do, is to come to me with a particular project. And a number of these involve contaminated soils and places where there are contaminants that have to go to what's called a Subtitle E landfill. And that is a landfill which is specifically designed to handle those kinds of wastes. And as part of that, there's an indemnification to the generator of the waste, and basically that gets passed off to Waste Management. Waste Management is part of their permitted landfill operation. They now assume that liability for that waste, and that's the reason a lot of these projects end up going to Pheasant Point, is that there's a good track record of them taking care of the waste in a environmentally responsible manner. And that's the way. And some of these projects might go elsewhere, but the landowner, the people in charge of the project, wanted to go to a Subtitle D landfill. So by giving Waste the opportunity to go in and bid on these, then it helps that whole situation. It provides that additional tonnage coming into Pheasant Point and additional revenues that we wouldn't have gotten to happen. So one of the things that you've seen, if I could go back real quickly here to the previous slide, what you see in some of these peaks right here, these peaks right here are due to primarily hailstorms, and that where we got a large influx of roofing materials and other materials related to storms. The influx here in 2016, 2017 were some special event projects that had some pretty significant tonnage. And so it's reflected in tonnage. When I come back to the board with some additional figures on the actual revenue, it won't quite match this up, but it's in the ballpark. So I show this to illustrate the fact that we have impact from special events, but it's not the base tonnage that we really would like to see at the landfill. It's base tonnage that kind of sustains the landfill revenues over time. And I think that's what Waste Management would like to get to too. It's not about we need to have every stinking ton of solid waste. It's about is there a sustainable waste stream there? And having a sustainable waste stream also helps the community, I believe, in another way. We mentioned this morning about the City of Omaha in 2 years is going to have a new collection contract. And they're going to go from the bin and your trash can to an automated cart system, where those recycle carts are going to probably generate twice as many recyclable materials. So there's an opportunity for the community to capture the value of those and turn it into some economic development. And that helps to offset the loss of stuff that we're actually putting in the landfill per se. The other thing it allows us to do, if we're having that sustainable flow of materials, is that it allows an entrepreneur that may have a process to use a recyclable to know, kind of, you know what, I know that there's gonna be, say, 50,000 tons of this particular kind of material that's gonna be available in Douglas County. Right now, we can't tell them that, because we have variable amounts of stuff that's just going elsewhere. And so that is a inherent weakness that the state solid waste management plan has. It doesn't require very good reporting, and you know, there's no definition on kind of where that stuff goes. So getting a handle on some of that, I think, is going to be critical as well. That's something that was pointed out in the solid waste report that was done through the legislature a couple of years ago, just been finalized about a little over a year ago, about the
Ken, I
need
got
for
a
better
question
reporting.
on recyclables.
Yes.
I read an article, and I'm asking you if you think this is true, that a lot of recyclables, this article was saying, aren't being used, they're just being warehoused, and it's
Correct.
a real inefficient process, and really
Correct.
not achieving, is that true?
Yes, that's correct. If you go back about a year ago, China changed some of their base policy about taking material from the rest of the world. And part of that all deals with the fact that they've got a lot of environmental problems that they are needing to deal with. And so they were getting a lot of contamination from materials kind of all over the world, but certainly the United States was shipping a lot of stuff there. They just said, hey, we're not going to take this anymore. So now what's happened is a lot of the markets, that market just went away. And so stockpiling materials, you know, waiting for the market to rebound so that it's actually somewhat profitable to sell them and to deal with it. That is why pushing to get local market development for recyclables is so important. Because if we can develop that local market and develop the local demand for it, then not only do we gain the economic benefit, we're not paying for transportation costs to send it somewhere, and then paying for transportation costs to get it back again in whatever form it now is in. So there is a study that's in progress, and I'll let Danielle, who's now here, maybe speak to that a little bit, about the Association of Plastic Recyclers that doing a survey here of Nebraska plastics manufacturers to determine how much recycled content they're using in their process, and seeing if there's an opportunity there to increase demand locally, which would then, turn around and, hey, we've got plastic products here that First Star Fiber, for example, is pulling out of the waste stream. Can it go to a manufacturer here in Omaha or somewhere else in Nebraska, and we keep that economic activity here? Interestingly enough, when the city goes to their automated cart system, I mean, the question, and Dale Gubbles with First Star, and First Star has been working with the city on some conversations about how much recycled content should go into those carts. And I think that the general rule of thumb is about 25% is kind of recycled content that is typical, kind of high end for a product. So, and maybe you can speak to this, the amount of like milk jugs and stuff that are collected in the community here, I go to First Star, I think in a year would satisfy maybe the 25%. Amount
yes,
potentially, just for the carts that would be needed for the new collection system. So there would be a demand for that amount of material.
Yes.
So trash and recyclables all go in the same bin? No.
No, it would be two separate bins.
No.
Yeah, two separate bins of that. Since we're talking about some of this stuff right now, I'm going to shift to Danielle. So what I've told him is basically nothing about the Energy Bank program, but Danielle Eastdale with First Star Fiber, they've been instrumental in kind of getting this program going, and I'm going to let Danielle kind of speak about kind of what the program is, what it's designed to do, and kind of you've got a couple of props here.
So this kind of goes to what you were talking about, the circular economy. One of the problems that we as the recycler that was taking all the materials, we were coming across a lot of problems with people. We call it wishful recycling. They really want to do the right thing, so they put stuff in their recycling containers that can't easily be recycled by traditional means. So there's a lot of plastic packaging out there that we call multi-laminate plastic packaging. So it's, even though it's like chip packet, it'll look like foil on one side, but colored plastic on the other side. All those things, they can't be recycled by traditional means because it's different types of plastic in a really thin layer. And what would happen is it would contaminate our recycling streams. It would get caught up in our machines, that are designed to separate all the different materials. So it would cause us a lot of hassles and problems in that respect. And so going back a couple of years, we got approached by Dow Chemical, who is a resin manufacturer, and they had done a pilot program in Citrus Heights in California that was collecting these types of materials and sending it to a pyrolysis plant, which basically heats it up in the absence of oxygen, so it's not burning, it's heating it up with no oxygen, which breaks it back down to its chemical components and turns it into a diesel fuel. So they approached us about doing a program here in Omaha. One of the gentlemen from the Sustainable Packaging division was originally from Nebraska, so they had connections with Codagra, and that's why they came to us. So we kind of said, well, if we're going to do it, we don't want to do it as a pilot because it's a whole lot of work to get something like that up and running. And once you turn a stream like that on, it's not easy to turn off. So we did a lot of work with them, and the Hefty Energy Bag Program was born and launched in Omaha. And basically what residents do is they buy the rolls of Hefty Energy bags, which I actually have one in my pocket over here, so I should grab it. These are available in all the grocery stores. So people buy them at the grocery store the same as they would any other trash bag. A bright orange color. They fill it up with all the hard to recycle plastics. So chip packets, foam to go containers, foam coffee cups, plastic cutlery, straws, all those things that are getting really bad press at the candy wrappers. All those things that can't be recycled go into this bag. When the bag's full, simply they tie it shut and they put it in the recycling container, and it comes to us at First Star. And it's bright orange, so we can see it really easily. We can pull it out before it gets all caught up in the machinery. It gets pulled out, and basically we bale it all up and we send it off to the end market. At the moment, it's going to a pyrolysis plant. We are looking at all sorts of different end markets, things that we've done with it. This is actually the top of a fence post, although it kind of looks like a big hockey puck right now. But this is made out of the plastics that has come out from Omaha, and it's a plastic fence post, like plastic lumber. Pass that around. This was also another pilot that we did with it, which was...
This is plastic?
Yep, yep. That's chip packets, candy wrappers, polystyrene, foam to go cups, and all sorts in there. So, and it drills like a normal fence post. You can screw into it like a normal fence post. All those sorts of things. This is another test we did, which is roofing board. It's a piece of ceiling roofing board. I pulled the paper layer off so you can see the plastics inside that have kind of been heated up and compressed and melted into that. So that's basically how the program works. At First Star, we've been really looking into all these different end markets. At the moment, it's going, like I said, it's going to pyrolysis to be turned into a diesel fuel, which is in Salt Lake. We would like to see a pyrolysis plant local here, closer to us here in Douglas County. So that's something that we're kind of looking at, making local end markets here, if at all possible. So, and really closing that loop.
So how do you educate people about it?
We,
I
we
mean, that,
do.
I've never
Right,
seen
I've
that
never
orange
seen
bag.
that.
Okay, they've had, on TV, they've had on the news
Really?
items about it.
Really?
There was something in waistline, I participate in it. We fill out a bag a week, and if we, during Christmas time, it was like 4 bags, but that's, you know. And I feel good about every little piece I put into it, because I know it's not going into the soil and not deteriorating. So it's a great program. How is it doing?
It's actually really taking off. We started off with just 6,500 households in Omaha to start off with. And that is now expanding now that it's available in retail. We are averaging between 4 to 5 tons a month, which, you know, that doesn't sound so much, but when you consider that all of these plastics are lightweight plastics, so the average bag weighs around 1 pound. So 5 tons, you're talking 10,000. You're talking
Yes.
10,000 people,
Yes.
10,000 households a month currently participating in the program. So it is definitely growing.
Are you doing presentations at neighborhood groups?
We are doing presentations at neighborhood groups. If you go to Omaha Zoo, they use it behind the scenes there for all the plastics from their animal feed and their enrichment programs and things like that. They have a bird show. This bird is amazing. They have a raven, and his name is Forrest. And he has actually been taught how to recycle, but he can differentiate what goes in the energy bag and what goes in the normal recycling bin. So he actually does a show 3 times a day.
Wow.
That should be on the newscast.
That's great.
It was on Morning Blend,
Was it?
that TV commercial you were just talking about, which is on KMTV. And if you're watching the Super Bowl, you'll see the commercial in the pregame coming up this weekend. That's actually my son in the commercial.
Oh,
so
really?
yeah. So we're out there trying to get the word out. We did a lot of events over this last summer.
I would like you to do a public presentation at our county board meeting.
So I can buy this orange bag now, so
Yeah.
I'm just gonna just put it out there with my other stuff.
And put it in your recycling container.
Can I
Yeah.
put it on the side if it's full and they'll know because it's an orange
I
bag?
would say because it's lightweight, I would say you probably want to put it in your recycling, and like you can put, you know, your recycling on top of it to hold it in there, because you
Okay.
don't want it kind of blowing, blowing off.
Do you do the recycling for like Abe's?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I have Abe's, if I put an orange
I
bag in
have
there.
I have Abe's in it because I'm in an SID and I have Abe's, and yes, it comes to us. So
Okay.
all of Greater Omaha can participate in the program.
Okay, I've got a question. You know, it mentions lots of plastics, and then it says all other non-recyclable, oh, plastic bags, okay. But if I have a plastic that's used like in a, edging for my garden, can I put that in there?
So the pyrolysis system is very forgiving. It can take a lot. The only thing it doesn't like is PVC because of the chlorine content in it.
Chlorine's fun to breathe.
So and if it's not PVC, it won't hurt going in there. One of the questions that we do get asked occasionally is what happens if some paper or something, like a little bit of paper gets in it or something like that. The pyrolysis process actually turns that into a char, they call it, which is very similar to carbon black, which is actually a very valuable commodity in itself. So it's a very forgiving process. So if there was a plastic that you weren't sure if you could recycle it,
I'm
it
looking
could-
for your samples you gave.
Right here.
Oh, on my left
Here's a
side.
question, Danielle. I don't mean to get too much into the minutia
Yeah.
of this, but I mean, this is fascinating to me. But don't you get a lot of residual when you talk about condiment packages and squeezable pouches? They've all, a toothpaste. You've got some extra material that you don't really want.
we ask people to make sure to put empty plastics in there.
Okay.
Obviously, you're going to have the residue on things like the little ketchup packets
Sure.
or what have you.
You can't
But
go wrong.
again, that's where the pyrolysis process converts that into char. Basically, anything that's not breaking down into the chemical plastic change gets turned into that char.
Okay.
How do you spell pyrolysis?
Pyrolysis.
Okay, that was just a test.
That's my accent. My accent makes it hard to hear as well sometimes. So.
And now let me give a terribly personal and inappropriate. You have a beautiful accent. Where is it from?
I am Australian originally.
All
But
right.
my accent is a bit of a hybrid because I spent half my life in Australia and half my life in Europe, so in the UK. So it's a bit of both.
Inappropriate to say, but it's a
Yeah,
beautiful
that's-
accent.
So, yeah, we'd like. I mean, at the moment, it is having to travel a long way to go to the pyrolysis plant. But like I said, we'd like to. We're looking at different ways of encouraging the end markets closer. And
So this is a local thing. I mean, this hefty program, it's only in a few places. Most of the country doesn't have it.
we are expanding at the moment, and we work with Reynolds, who is the bag manufacturer, and Dow to help with the expansion of this program. It's now running in Boise, Idaho, Cobb County in Atlanta, and we're just launching in Lincoln, coming up very shortly, so it's about to be available in Lincoln as well. So, and we deal with some small communities.
You say
around.
we, is that First Star Fiber? Or is that First Star is in all those locations?
We are not in all those locations, but we actually operate, because we are the ones that have the experience in recycling and programs like that. We work with Reynolds and Dow
Okay.
in showing other communities how they can set up their own program as well.
Thank you. This is fascinating.
So how small a community can you take that would make it profitable?
It basically, it comes down to the MRF, the place that's receiving the recyclables. We have a lot of little communities,
Little meaning,
1,000
Okay.
households that because they bring their recycling to us. For example, Ogallala, they are about to launch their program through Western Resources Group. They're about to launch their program because they bring their recycling to us. So it makes sense for
so
them to be.
what about Blair and Fort Calhoun and Fremont?
If they wanted to establish programs, they could.
Have you approached them, or has anybody?
We are speaking to various different communities. I don't deal with every single community,
Oh, come
so
on.
I'm not. I'd like to be in 15 places at once, but haven't quite figured that one out yet. But yes, we are dealing. We are speaking to other communities.
I love the concept and the project. I'm glad you brought these. I
Yeah.
was surprised how heavy this was.
Mm-hmm.
It's as heavy as drywall.
Well, this very interestingly, the company that makes these fence posts was out of just outside of Kansas City, and it was a older gentleman who owned the company, and he wanted to retire. So we have actually been working with a new startup in Red Oak, Iowa, who were interested in producing this. So they are about to start producing this in Red Oak in Iowa
Nice.
as well. So,
Any other questions? Nobody? That was wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Can I have a couple more?
yeah, sure.
I toured First Star Fiber 2 years back, and it's this huge place with like 3 people on it.
It's a former-
Amazing how few
Well,
people it takes to
It's a
run.
former
if
Hiki
you-
Dinky, if I remember.
If you saw it a couple of years ago, you
Distribution.
should come and retour it.
All right.
Because we have just, in this last year, invested a lot of money in putting in a new sort line that has all optical sorters and things like that. So it's
So you
it's
don't
quite.
need as many people now.
We still have the people for the
Being a little
quality
facetious,
control and everything like that. We have the capabilities to take more material.
Okay.
We were thinking, ahead in Omaha when they look to moving to a cart system and the increased material that we anticipate through that. So,
Very good.
but you're always more than welcome to come for a tour.
And may I suggest you approach youth groups like the Boy Scouts and what used to be the Girl Scouts, I'm not sure what they call it now.
And it's still Girl Scouts.
Still Girl Scouts, and other youth organizations. and use them. And have you approached institutions like Omaha Home for Boys? And
We have been speaking with Boys Town, I know is one that we have been speaking with, and we have been doing a lot of work with community groups as well, and reached out to them. I know that we've been talking to quite a few different different groups about what we can, how we can partner with them and things like that. So.
I could see it as an educational thing for when a Boy Scout's trying to become a Eagle Scout.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Kent, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
And you're welcome to stay, but if you
And
need to go, I understand that too.
Yeah.
So, okay.
It's an exciting meeting.
Thank you, Danielle. Appreciate it.
So to transition back to we were just talking about the special event disposal projects. One of the things, so we're kind of at a crossroads on some of this. I mentioned wanting to get to a point where we have a more sustainable flow of materials going to the landfill. We would like to see base tonnage there to kind of stabilize that, so we're not in such a peaks and valleys in terms of tonnage and revenues from the landfill. One of the things that is coming up now is whether we have, for use an example, a recent project where it was a longer term project that actually would go for several years, and I came to find out that it was more than just a specific project, and there were actually multiple haulers that were bringing materials into a project site. So it was acting kind of like a transfer station. So I pulled the authorization from that, and as part of that, I indicated to Waste Management that I would bring this back before the board and discuss kind of how we wanted to potentially go forward with this. So that's one of the things that's kind of on the table right now, or that I want to put on the table, is to how can we, what steps can we take to potentially get a more stable, sustainable flow of materials to the landfill, which would stabilize the revenue flow and so on. So one of the things that was discussed, whether do we want to expand my authority to do projects that are a little broader than this. My initial recommendation is that no, you don't want to give me that authority, because I think it creates a slippery slope in that now everyone's going to want a special rate.
Yep.
And that's going to serve a negative in terms of landfill tonnage and revenue, and especially revenues per se. So there are a couple of things that we have been looking at internally. One of them is to establish what I'm just going to call a transfer trailer rate, which would allow a designated tonnage stream coming from wherever to come in as long as it was on transfer trailers, because that allows the transportation costs to be significantly less. And in return for that tonnage, we would provide them a little bit of a break in the scale rate. So we're looking at that. We're evaluating kind of what that potentially could mean in terms of the increased tonnage. Even if it's a lower rate, this would be tonnage that typically would not be coming to us otherwise. So we're looking at that. We're also evaluating whether we could potentially do kind of I'm just going to use the term volume discount, whereas the larger haulers, if they consistently brought us a certain amount of tonnage, that we would discount to a point the scale rate. So we're just evaluating that. So those are two things that I think eliminate the slippery slope piece of this, but still allow us to potentially gain some new waste streams for the landfill.
So you could do something like the first 6,000 tons. Is that scale rate, and the next 6,000 tons is a dime less, you know, make up the numbers.
I think there's some things to work out in terms of just how we administer some of that. And I think we would do it probably on a monthly basis, whereas if, let's say that you brought in 10,000 tons in a particular month, then that might qualify you for a lower rate for the next month as long as you brought that same amount of tonnage or greater in, or something to that effect. I don't see that it would be a sliding scale where, you know, the first 6,000 is this, and the next is this, and the next is this. Administratively, that would be a nightmare to try to track and to audit on a regular basis. So again, we're looking at an option there to see what might be in the county's best interest in terms of rates. But basically, it would get from, you know, individual packer trucks, lower left over here, going to more of a transfer station type thing where you'd have these smaller neighborhood collection vehicles coming in, dumping it at a location, and then it being loaded onto trailers like would be maybe analogous to the lower right. And those larger trailers would then come out to the landfill to dump. They would be, there would probably be in order maybe one of those larger trailers for every 4 packer trucks, for example. So we would reduce the amount of truck traffic on the highways. So from a safety and wear and tear standpoint, that's better. We're dealing with fewer scale tickets and so on. So there's some administrative advantages there too. So some options there that are being evaluated. I mentioned the City of Omaha's solid waste collection contract. The request for bid has been out on the streets for a couple of months now. It actually comes in, and those bids are due back tomorrow at 11 o'clock. So we will find out kind of how many bidders there are. We'll be taking a close look at this. There are provisions in the specifications that the municipal solid waste that's collected, the trash, has to go to Pheasant Point. There's a little caveat in their language that says, you know, the Public Works Director can designate a different landfill, and we've asked for clarification on that, and I expressed my very distinct displeasure in the language, indicating that we should, I mean, there has to be a bona fide reason for them not to take it there, and you know the intent is for them to take it there. The exception would be, you know, if for some reason the Pheasant Point landfill wasn't available. So I can only think of 2 reasons it wouldn't be available. One would be that there's some kind of a catastrophe that somehow shuts the landfill down. Or secondly, that Waste Management wasn't able to renew their landfill permit. Neither of those, I think, is very likely. So I'm pretty confident at this point going forward that the City of Omaha is going to abide by the existing interlocal agreement that we entered into in 2012, that all solid waste pursuant to city and or county contracts has to go to Pheasant Point. So that's kind of where that is right now. Again, going from the recyclable deal from the bins to the carts, that's going to be probably a doubling of the amount of recyclables based on what has typically been shown across the country when communities go from a non-automated system to an automated system like this. The Solid Waste Working Group is part of the Heartland 2050 initiative. A lot of the things that were going on there were very similar to the Integrated Solid Waste Management Task Force that was developed a few years ago as part of our regional solid waste management plan. So the subgroups that are kind of working here, we talked about the circular economy thing. First Star has been involved in the American Association of Plastic Recyclers survey of Nebraska plastics manufacturers and kind of where that's going, potentially identifying some more demand for locally produced plastic recyclable content. The One Voice, One Message is simply to to be consistent with best practices in terms of solid waste management. There's a group that's looking at waste reduction policies. That is very much kind of in line with what's going on with, I believe, the corporate culture and what we're seeing with different companies that want to get to quote unquote zero waste. They want to find ways to divert stuff away from the landfill. There are opportunities there that we simply have to recognize and take advantage of. There's been some initial discussions with some folks at the Chamber of Commerce indicating that if you want to try to get new companies that have a green footprint to locate here, then have to identify the deficiencies in your solid waste programs. We don't have as much solid waste infrastructure here as a number of communities, and that's going to work against companies coming here. So that's just something that has to be kind of in play here. Data measurement, this is a huge weak point in the state of Nebraska. We simply don't have the teeth in the regulations that require data to be reported on what's being transferred, what's being utilized, and how it's being utilized. Which is a good segue to yard waste. Yeah. So it's yet to be seen exactly what the implications of yard waste are going to be with the new city contract, because they've been talking about commingling. If that was the case, then you're going to see yard waste mixed in with garbage that's going to come to Pheasant Point.
Haven't they been doing that for a while now anyway? Or is that just
on and off,
occasionally? Okay.
on and off.
All right.
Back in 2016, given the lack of drivers and they were having a hard time trying to staff all that. That's going to continue to be an issue. But with the automated systems, there's also not going to be unlimited yard waste. I mean, that's kind of where I see this going.
Okay.
And so there'll be a limited amount of yard waste you can put.
All right.
But the commingling issue is going to have to be resolved. And once they get their bids in, the city and city council is going to have to figure out kind of what they want to do.
I love the rationalization when they did that, so they could get more method for supposed.
Yeah. So, I'd mentioned this in the past. LB 1101, which was authorized by the legislature in 2016, was a year-long study. Danielle was actually part of the advisory group that was on that study. There were a number of recommendations that came out of that. A couple of them relate to the legislation, LB 850, that we talked about this morning, and adjusting that landfill tip fee up. One of the other things was recommendation was about data gathering and reporting and so on. So there's some things there. The study is still recent enough that I think we need to hold the state and the Department of Environment and Quality accountable for what's in that study, and hopefully we can get some action out of some of that provides some good things for Nebraska and end users. So as mentioned this morning, a beneficiary of the legislation as it's proposed, the intent is really to get more dedicated, sustainable funding for the household hazardous waste activities, whether they be facility operations or whether they be just special event the collection activities that are occurring around the state. That would then free up some of the grant money to improve recycling, other solid waste infrastructure. And by also solid waste infrastructure, I would also potentially throw in that this could be transfer station, which would make it more economically beneficial for solid waste to be sent to a given location, and then transfer trailers move it out to Pheasant Point. So that's a piece of this solid waste infrastructure that also could be in place that is separate from the recyclable components. So we talked about that this morning. I won't spend any more time on that per se. That, before I slip over into a few comments about planning and zoning and stormwater and so on, is there any questions or anything on the solid waste landfill piece of it? Okay.
Appreciate that.
Very briefly, from a planning and zoning standpoint, you approved the updates to the county's comprehensive development plan last October, and we're in the process of now looking at regulations updates to make sure that they fit with the new comprehensive plan. And lastly, just a reminder to the board that we still have 2 vacancies in the zoning board of adjustment that we do need to have filled at the earliest opportunity.
Are they, I'm sorry.
Mark,
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
she's polite and waits.
Are we able, or are they residency requirements or district requirements?
They just have to be Douglas County residents.
Doesn't matter if
That's
they're
it.
In or
Omaha
out?
or out.
Doesn't matter.
How many do we have in and out? What's the makeup right now?
Good question. I'd have to get back to you on that.
Can you,
Yeah,
appreciate it.
okay.
Can we look at the people who applied for the zoning board and reach out to them and ask them?
planning board?
The planning
Planning
board.
board,
We had
absolutely.
such a flood of people interested in the
Yes.
planning board last go
Yeah,
around.
and see if they'd want to be on this. Is that,
I think that'd be a great idea.
Okay. All right. There is one member of the planning commission that sits on the board of adjustment.
Right.
That member right now is Bob Woody.
Okay.
So, and again, this is the will of the board. We do need two people to replace people who decided not to reapply. Real quickly regarding stormwater stuff, we got a new stormwater permit as of January of last year, and so we've been operating on kind of a new set of stormwater management plan guidelines. All of them, I think, tend to be in the county's favor. We had quite a bit of input into our new management plan. So one of it, and we've been in this long enough now that we have a fairly established program. One of the main elements is what we call stormwater outfall inspections. Outside of city limits, we inspect all of those outfalls on a regular basis on a 5-year cycle. Basically, when we find one that's in good condition, we leave it alone for 5 years. If we find one that's in fair condition, we'll go back and look at that and figure out what needs to be done with it. We'll follow up with the landowner or the public entity to get that fixed. And if we find something in poor condition, that's our immediate action. We've got to have something done there. And again, we're following up with the landowner. A lot of times these are in common areas, so we're dealing with SIDs and so on to get those things resolved. But that's going pretty well. The other thing we deal with a lot of is what's called illicit discharge. And so we'll have some kind of a spill or something. A lot of these things are within the city of Omaha's extraterritorial jurisdiction, or the Bennington ETJ. And we have memorandum of understanding with both of those entities such that each one knows kind of what the other's responsibilities are. The rub with the stormwater permit is that outside of the municipal limits, we're responsible for everything, but we don't have any zoning authority or any regulatory authority because the cities are exercising their planning and zoning authority. So our regulations per se don't pertain there. So that's why we have the MOUs in place, and DEQ and EPA recognize those. And when we have an enforcement action that needs to happen for either one of these, basically if it's in the city of Omaha's ETJ, then we have them on board, and then they have to use their enforcement procedures for that. It actually makes our job a lot easier because we can hand that off to them, and we've done what we needed to do. And it's a minimal expense for us. The other thing is we're working with what we call the Nebraska H2O group, and this is basically all of the outstate stormwater permit holders. So they're kind of in the same boat with us, but a lot of them, it's like the cities of Kearney, Grand Island, Hastings, Norfolk, Scottsbluff and Gearing, and so on. they all kind of comprise this Nebraska H2O group. They have some best management practices and some other things that we can kind of piggyback on occasionally. And we get the benefit of some of the things that they do, from the research that they do and some of the other things that they do. So we're trying to get some benefits out of that as well. The one thing that, the one thing that is kind of a negative thing here is that our stormwater grants went away. The state is no longer funding the stormwater management plan program grants, and that means that in the last one, in the 2016 grant was $122,000, which means now we need to come up with funding on our own. So one of the benefits is that our new stormwater permit doesn't require monitoring per se. So that immediately took out about half of our budget number, which was a positive. And then we've got some other cooperative type things going on so that we've been able to minimize to the greatest extent possible the amount of our general fund expenditures here. We are now put this into funding under planning and zoning because that's where it fits the closest. So our one planning and zoning organization now has our stormwater assistant that deals with all of this. Her salary and benefits are coming out of that, and that's probably going to be the major expense there. Mostly her time going out into the field and doing these inspections and those types of things, and following up on our education and outreach stuff. And we're doing that through three-pronged approach. We target third and fourth grade kids, primarily in Millard right now, and then we're also targeting the construction site contractors and realtors. We're finding more and more of a gap there that exists where there's more and more of this green infrastructure and these other things which the county is very supportive of, but they're being put in places where private property owners have influence over kind of how well they're maintained and so on. So having realtors on board and understanding what's involved with some of these things, I think is a very good thing in terms of being able to maintain some of these features. So that's why we're doing that. Moving on to weed. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So for you to weed control, the comprehensive plan, I guess I'm just asking, in there, did they include when we were having those conversations at the health department about the urban farming, being able to do some stuff out there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, the urban farm, local food production, that is a now standard language in there, okay. So that use type and all of those types of things are there. Okay. So it becomes something that is a much better option for folks. And frankly, there are a lot of places in Douglas County where that kind of thing makes a lot more sense than like row crop agriculture, like in the floodplains, out between the Elkhorn and the Platte, for example. Okay. So that's there, and that is a use type that is encouraged. Okay. So yeah, absolutely.
Just for the record, there's a place in your district where it's technically it's called No More Empty Pots.
Yeah.
So they wanted that in there. So
good.
Yes.
Good.
And yeah, absolutely. Weed control, you heard from Mike this morning, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. He mentioned some of the benefits of the Lower Platte weed management area and some of the benefits to the county. Certainly there's statewide coordination that goes on with this, and at the NACO conference back in December, I specifically sit in on the weed control folks to kind of see what all they're talking about on a statewide basis. Some of the rural issues are a little bit different than the urban issues, but there's still influence. The Platte River and a lot of the stuff that Mike was talking about Phragmites. I mean, out here in Buffalo, Dawson, Hall County, you just saw just acres and acres of that stuff, and they've done a good job of trying to get a handle on it. And of course, since the water flows downstream, we get seed source and everything else from that, and purple loosestrife and stuff. So it's a continual fight, but I think what you heard from Mike this morning is that by being proactive and, and just keeping, getting bits and pieces of it every year, you stay ahead of it. And that's the key. You just don't want to get behind the 8 ball here. So I think he's done an excellent job in kind of doing that. Lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about landscape management. At the health center campus, this is an aerial view from I believe last year, prior to the 2 parking lots going in. So you've got 2 parking lots that kind of should have that footprint right now. We have also met with.
That's his journey?
I'm sorry.
No, for a second.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, 42nd, here's 42nd, or excuse me,
Right,
this is
no,
World
got it,
right here,
got
and
it.
here's 42nd
Got it.
Pacific on there, and
Got
the
it.
Field Club over here. So that's approximate location of the 2 new parking lots. Worked with Metro and Kurt Slyman, and convinced them that they needed, and this was with input from all the department directors out on the health center campus, to reinstall a transit shelter here at 42nd and William, I think, is the cross street here. This is the location where it makes the most sense to have a shelter. So that's in the process of being put back in. So that should be a nicer shelter. This is just a stock photo off the internet, so that's not exactly what it's going to look like, but I think it'll be a nicer looking structure than what was there before.
May I pay that?
Yes. Yes.
Good.
Yep. There's no cost to us for that. The other thing, before we move with any other, kind of campus improvements, I need to know kind of what's going on with kind of a campus sign there. We are going to continue with our approach of tree diversity, and both from an age and a species standpoint throughout the campus. We need to mitigate the loss of a lot of trees out here. We want to make sure that we are getting shade on parking lots wherever we can, not only from an aesthetic standpoint, but from a stormwater standpoint. It's very beneficial. This is in a combined sewer area, so the more stormwater we keep out of the combined sewer, the better it is. We have, I think, half dozen now bioretention cells and rain gardens located on campus, and we'll continue to expand that as the opportunities present themselves. This is the West Campus. I have mocked this up based on an aerial photo. We are proposing some additional tree plantings, again, that are mostly adjacent to parking lots and driveways, so that we can shade those, reduce surface temperatures, reduces toxicity of runoff, intercept stormwater, and so on. There are a couple other elements here, and this shows the Fitzgerald property right here. There are these blue areas right here, this one right here, and this one right here are new stormwater bioretention facilities that were built to comply with the City of Omaha's stormwater regulations. They are seeded. They're going to require a few years to get established. We are proposing to add some pollinator gardens and some more natural habitat alongside here to buffer some of these and to provide some better aesthetics as those things get developed. This is not a single year plan. This is a multi-year build in stages type thing. The other piece of it would be to establish a walking trail that goes all the way around the property, probably in a couple of different routes, to kind of build on the fitness and health initiatives that the county has already put in place. But also, we're going to have a number of employees out here. The Sheriff's Department's also indicated that they have employees that are interested in walking paths and so on. So Sheriff has a staff meeting tomorrow, and they're talking about this proposed plan. I want to get their input, make sure that we're not doing anything that's going to compromise safety, security here from their standpoint. With that, I am done.
Have you worked with like public properties and, as they do the landscaping for, to finish off
The landscaping for the Fitz home was basically just given to me, what they had proposed. What I'm proposing is once they have what they have in place, then this is from that point going forward. There are a number of trees that were taken out there. There are a few more that need to be taken out because they were compromised during construction. And some of them just, we're gonna have to kind of evaluate them in the spring to see how they come through. But this is, yeah, what the architect and properties came up with as part of what the bond issue is paying for. This is beyond that.
So what happened to the trees? Somebody run into them?
Well, anytime you have a construction project, you're gonna have impacts around landscaping. If you look at this particular courtyard right here, there's two large sycamores there. I mean, there was a certain amount of construction activity that had to happen around there. And that's part of the construction site. Over on the other side where the treasurer's drive-through is, there were two large sycamore trees there. I made a determination that those were going to be hazard trees regardless of what happened. Those needed to be taken out. So we're gonna have cars driving through there on a regular basis. Those trees were gonna be compromised beyond belief. And the last thing we need is a 50 foot sycamore dropping a 12-inch limb on a car. Or even worse, directly on a person or something like that. So we have to be cognizant of that. I'm gonna be evaluating every tree out there, especially this coming year, to see kind of where it's at, coming out of the construction process. Because there's just a lot of activity there, and that it's going over root zones and stuff, and you never know exactly how trees are gonna respond. They're pretty resilient, but I also have to be cognizant of county liability. You know, especially where we have targets like cars and people and so on. We've got to be cognizant of that. So.
Any other questions?
One of the things that I will be doing, once I finalize this concept, I would like to be bringing it back to the board in a county board session and having you sign off on the concept. And understanding that this is kind of where we want to go forward with this, and here's some of the elements to this, and I'll have more detail. But I want to make sure I get input from the law enforcement folks, especially here.
Good.
Okay. That's all I had. Happy to entertain any questions.
Office relocation.
Pardon me? Oh, excuse me. Office relocation. We are anticipating moving on March 15th.
Really?
We will be physically closing our office at Menke Circle that day and probably the following Monday so that we can facilitate the physical move. But I would anticipate by Tuesday, the 19th of March, we will be back up and running at the FITS, open for business as usual. I'm looking at trying to have some public meetings out there mid-March. I'm still waiting for confirmation that the conference rooms will be done by that time. But we in emergency management and I think the .com component are going to be the ones that move out there first.
Okay.
On March 15th.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Okay. And thank you.
Any questions, anybody? Next on the agenda is an update on the Extension Community Services.
Thank you.
It was worth all that wait, wasn't it?
It was. I am always interested in what Kent has to say.
Indeed.
So,
Thanks, Daniel.
we see him every once in a while at the extension office. So I have a few handouts. These are some folders that just have some of our latest program materials in them. You're welcome to have them. And,
Thank you.
one more. And I do have a PowerPoint, so I have not run a PowerPoint in this room before. Just need a moment
Here,
to
I will, yeah.
put that together.
From cabbage salad. This is for Dale.
They had sausage.
Give me a flash drive, I'll fix
Sure.
Warm, right?
Okay. So you should be able to go
All
right
right.
here. Get rid of this. What is yours called? Oops.
There it is.
This one?
Yep.
Oh, wait a minute.
That's
Oh,
fine.
there you go.
Thank you. Well, what I thought I'd do today, since you all know that Extension is a very broad and diverse organization with lots of service points of impact with our community. What I wanted to talk to you about today a little bit was really our food access oriented programming and some of our partnerships that we're forming. We formed this last year that will give you an idea of how we're engaging with the community in terms of opportunities for urban ag programming. So today I had intended to bring with me Susan Whitfield from No More Empty Pots and Vicki Henry, who is now our past president since I was delayed from being able to talk to you last year, and volunteer for our extension board. She's also an active 4-H volunteer for us. They were going to also talk today about their involvement as partners in our community service process, but both of them had to pull out and take care of some other business, so they can't be here today. Oops. Can I just do this? Oh, there we go. So this first slide, if you haven't been to our Hope Garden out at 168th and Center, that is a garden that we have. I'll talk a little bit more later in the presentation, but that's just an example of the kind of produce that is coming out of an urban garden here in Douglas County. And it's run by our Master Gardener volunteers. These are a few statistics that Susan was going to talk about. There are almost 35,000 children in the Omaha metro area that are food insecure. That's a very powerful and troubling statistic. And 40% of all children living in the North Omaha area are also food insecure. So that tells you just how powerful the need for food resources are in our area. So it's a health issue, a community development and equity issue. And we are committed to working with our partners in the community to help find ways to address these issues and provide educational resources and other university support to work with our partners to see what we can do to help work with these issues in the community. Our partners with Extension really are along a very broad spectrum. The 11 connections I'm referring to are the types of communities that we work with in the Douglas and the Sarpy County. Of course, we're working in 2 counties. So we work with for-profit, nonprofit, national government, county, city governments, regional initiatives, national and local initiatives, local collaborative groups and programs, our volunteer communities, religious communities, and immigrant communities. So our educators and team members are working across the spectrum to find ways to support our citizens. So you may have heard Commissioner Rogers refer to Susan Whitfield of No More Empty Pots. She's one of our very key partners. She sits as a representative on our extension board in Commissioner Rogers' district. And she's also been an incredible partner for us with a variety of connections. One of the first opportunities I had to work with Susan when I started in my position as unit leader was to co-chair an important initiative here in Douglas County for Growing Food Connections, which was to help identify and support the formation of a foods council in the region, and we've been able to successfully do that and have it housed in the Heartland 2050 group. So we're working out of there. We also worked in partnership with many other partners in the community to supply local foods for local table symposiums that happened for 3 years in a row. We did not have one last year, but those were educational opportunities for the community to come and talk to a wide variety of partners and learn from extension educators about how they could help support local food programs and become local food producers through those kinds of programs. And then also, I'll talk about Ken a little bit. He just left. I guess that's an apt time to talk about him. I warned him when we were supposed to be up a couple of months ago that I was going to include him in my presentation. But he is someone that we also work with closely at the Extension Office, not just for these types of issues, but also others. But I'm very fortunate to have been able to partner with Kent, with Growing Food Connections, Local Foods Coordinating Council, and the Solid Waste Management Working Group. Of course, he just gave an incredible presentation about the kind of work he's doing with solid waste management. He is also running a group in town that involves many other partners, including Extension, to see what we can do to further resolve solid waste issues in the community. So I would say Kent has been a really amazing partner for us, and I wanted to give him the proper shout out today.
Good.
Returning to our board, one of the things that I've been working very hard on during my time as unit leader has been to really build our extension board, to make them an advocate and an advisor for us to reach and connect to the community. And one of our recent board member acquisitions is actually in Commissioner Borgeson's district, and that is Mary Current. She is an owner, proprietor of Crazy Gringo Hot Sauce. She is a local entrepreneur, and so she is creating her hot sauce with locally grown peppers, and she actually does work with nonprofits. Particularly, she's been working with City Sprouts and growing some of her hot peppers out of the South Omaha garden plot that they have, and also has worked with our new urban ag educator, John Porter, with growing some of the peppers for her sauce as well. So she is a member of our board, an important voice for our board as a local foods producer and an independent local foods business owner. So we're really, really excited to have her on board with us. And then I had mentioned at the beginning, you saw that picture of Hope Garden located at 160th and Center Street. This is an example of a partnership. It's actually a long-standing partnership. This garden has been in place for over 14 years. If you haven't seen it, I would love to take you guys out to see it when it is in full production during the growing season. They're on just under an acre of land, and they can produce up to, well, you can see the numbers right there. In 2018, they had 6,400 pounds of produce come out of that land. They have really done an amazing job over the years putting together a garden structure that is highly productive, and they do it in concert with two other community partners, Heartland Hope Mission, which picks up the packaged food that the Master Gardeners prepare, and they distribute it at their food pantry, and Faithful Shepherd Presbyterian, which is the landowner, and they also provide the water for the garden. So the garden sits right behind Faithful Shepherd Presbyterian Church, and they've been doing a phenomenal job of providing food to our community. And they also work with Heartland Hope Mission to identify any kind of culturally specific foods that people that are going to their pantry might need. So they will customize what they grow each year to what the clientele at the pantry are seeking. So they're really doing some amazing things there. And I'm talking to the crew that works there. They would love to replicate this garden or teach others to replicate it. It's really, really, really a phenomenal part of what we do. This is John Porter. He is our urban agriculture coordinator. We hired him. He came on board in January 2017. He's been extremely busy ever since. I'm not even sure if even our extension leadership knew how popular John would be. But urban agriculture is a very, very hot topic, and he has been very busy and doing a great job connecting in the community. Those bullet points show you a few things that he's been involved with. He also teaches at the College of Technical Agriculture in Curtis, Nebraska, and engages in educational programming here, and works with Mike Pallas out at the Cooper Farm, Nebraska Home for Boys. Claire, you probably know Mike well.
Very well.
So John's in charge of the plants out there, and is doing quite a bit of amazing work for us. And in fact, they just hired not too long ago another individual who's working in this area, Ben McShane Jewell. He is not operating out of our unit. I believe he's in Dodge County, Dodge or Washington, and he's actually working through a community vitality program, but he is also working with food innovation. So hopefully we'll be talking more about him in the near future too. And then we are really excited about a new partnership that we're exploring with Greg Fripp of Whispering Roots. He is developed this amazing nonprofit in town, if you're not familiar, dedicated to bringing fresh food, nutrition education, innovative agriculture techniques, and STEM education to urban and rural underserved communities. He's worked with some of our educators in our office with school enrichment programs, working with the 4-H and Youth Development Team to promote STEM education and ag literacy in various programs in the community. And he is also joining our board through an advisory committee as a community partner member. So we're getting with some community partners to have a conversation about what we can do to even better serve our community. So Greg will be working with us on that level, not as a board member, but as part of a advisory group to support us.
Is he gonna run it out of 75 North location, or is he doing it through schools?
He does have that facility at 75 North. He's also has these smaller aquaponics units that he will place in schools.
Okay.
So I have seen one of those in operation. I think it was out at Twin Ridge. It's pretty cool. And he's been out and about doing some things. I'm going to catch up with him in a couple of weeks, so find out what else he's up to. We're really excited to have him as a voice that we will from the community that we can work with and get some great ideas. Vicki Henry, our immediate past president, was going to be here to talk a little bit to you about her experience on the board and what she's been doing over her term as president and now as past president. She'll provide us some strong advisory support in her role as past president. But she, in that picture, she is, if you go all the way to the right, she's the second one in with the gray t-shirt on. She's also, her family has been heavily involved with 4-H over the years. And she served in Commissioner Kavanaugh's district when she was president. And she is,
Is she still? Does she stay on the board?
she just,
Because she just reappointed
she just
somebody.
got reappointed.
Today, I think.
Yeah.
Good.
Today we
But she stepped down as president.
She's no longer president. In fact, if I would have had time to bring in our new president, I'd love to introduce you to him. His name's Sean Pollock, and he is an executive at Mutual of Omaha in risk management. And he's hitting the ground running and really has some amazing ideas, and he'll be a great leader for us.
Very good.
So, just finishing up, Nebraska Extension is going through some exciting transition times. Perhaps you've heard of some of this. It also involves our main campus. The campus itself is celebrating its 150th anniversary, and Nebraska Extension in particular is really focusing on strategic planning for goals on what they want to look like in 2025. So we're very dedicated to focusing on community engagement, innovative programming, and enhanced networking. So our dean actually very recently, just this month, went statewide and held community focus groups. And we just had ours in Omaha a couple of weeks ago. So we had 25 people there, quite a big crowd, and a very productive conversation about what Nebraska Extension can look like for the community here coming up.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry I missed that, but I would, can you, I mean, I still would like to push with them to see the IAR,
Institute of Ag and
Yeah.
Natural Resources.
to see them have a more heavily urban presence and some of that stuff. I mean, I would love to see, I mean, other places, you see their presence a little more, but like that Water Institute and all that, I would love to see them.
What was the
Try to
name
put
of the
some extension.
organization again?
The Institute of, basically the School of Agriculture, Institute of Agriculture
Okay.
and Natural Resources, since, you know, it's a power, yeah, I'd like it to get to some of the urban parts of the state.
Well,
That's my only view. So
I-
that's my only pass, but.
I appreciate that, and,
So, I mean, you can tell them that I asked my specific, you know, I couldn't make it there. I still wanna see them put their tentacles down.
well, maybe a good next step could be to have John Porter and perhaps Ben McShane Jewell come speak to you as educators in those areas about what they're doing.
That's fine, I mean, they can come in the committee, because I don't want them to come out there and the board get blasted.
Oh, come on.
What?
Maybe Boyle
I
won't
don't,
be
yeah, I
there.
don't want to come to the board and get blasted by
Well-
board. I mean, I'm legitimately want to
Hell,
see
people
if they
get
can
blasted
get
anywhere they come
Yeah.
to this point.
to get them, you know, east of Lincoln.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to see that place have some presence or see their input here. But yeah, if they come here, to the committee, I'd love to hear.
Okay, yeah, I think you'd really enjoy listening to what they have to offer. And they'll be much more robust in their presentation than I can be, because they know their areas better than I do.
This was very good. And tell the two ladies who didn't make it today what they missed. That it was well worth the,
Oh, Vicky knows us, she's.
6 hour
she's not
wait.
gonna fall for that.
well worth the 6 hour wait.
Well, Vicki and I took advantage of the conference room and camped out in there this morning and got
Very
some work
good.
knocked out.
Nice, wow, somebody got something done on a
Your-
Tuesday.
your
We're
tax
not used to
dollars
that
at work.
around here, that's a good thing.
So just let me ask you, do you all expect any drama in the budget to you all?
But that's just
I-
free, right?
Should I?
State budget.
Oh,
That kind of
She
triggers
knows something she
over
don't
here
know.
to you.
yeah, it was.
No, not here, but I mean, you know, there's that kind of understood match play that we play. I'm just wondering if you all experience anything hit from the state.
Well, it's a good question. With the biennium budget being an obvious topic of conversation in Lincoln, we're very attentive to what our Nebraska Extension message is. And part of what we're looking at the campus level is how we can structure Nebraska Extension to be more responsive in the community. So as you start to see information in the news coming forth, there's actually information on the websites right now at the university level about what the N-150 Commission is looking at. We are looking at some potential reorganization of what extension will look like. And the expectation of that move is to really work to make it a more successful at the kind of community engagement that we can do, whether it's rural or urban in scope. And of course, obviously, we're very predominantly urban in the Douglas and Sarpy area, but there are definitely going to be some ways to address that.
Okay, last question. Who got hired for the urban position that you all were interviewing?
That was John Porter, who I just.
That was okay.
Yep. And
So he
then-
works for you, but at,
He works,
Boyd's home?
he's out of our office,
alright,
and then he also has an appointment at Curtis
okay,
for educating.
Teaching, alright.
Teaching there too.
alright.
So he's like the urban
We-
guidance report. So I mean,
We
that's my
call him
understanding.
the urban
Okay.
ag coordinator.
Okay.
I think we actually have him classified, and and I could be wrong at this point, but the last time I saw, we had him classified in the crops and water systems area for programming. But obviously, you know, he's doing urban agriculture support
Okay,
for us
very good.
here.
Very good.
Yeah,
And I like the casual conversation at the end here. I really did.
good.
Because I like eavesdropping.
Well, I would hope since Ronnie Green was the former dean, you all should be a little.
Well, and Hank Bounds as well, our new president, has a background in agriculture, so hopefully we'll realize all those dreams. And I can get maybe John Porter and some of his folks over here to have a conversation with you about what urban ag looks like.
Is there any other business? Seeing none, I.
Was that a thumbs up meaning yay, or I've got some business?
And by the way,